It would be interesting. I wish she would come.
I think then I mean certainly I would then have a even bigger problem, I think, because then I think if somebody actively asks you not to do something, then you're faced with another level of dismissal of the artist's intentions. And then what's to stop you then presenting half the work and not the other half, changing the artwork? I mean, then you take all responsibility onto yourself as a museum. Then you say, basically, we buy this work, but we can do what we like with it. We could also sell it. We can also destroy it. We can also... No, but I mean, the dangers are, if you say that the artist's intentions have no validity whatsoever, that you can do with it what you like, then you get... And as a museum, you then get into some difficult territory, I think. I think you risk something by doing this, which is not only about Israel-Palestine, but it's also about the whole of the collection, because you're saying a little bit in this that you can do what you like with the collection without any control system at all. And you could then end up with situations where you cut a painting in half and show half of it or whatever, because you decide that that's a good thing for the exhibition. It would make me worried, but you're right that there's no legal requirement to ask the artist, it's true.
Anyhow, my conscience was clear because I did show Palestinian artists along the 90s, and I'm planning to do a big show with only Palestinian artists on June next year. So I don't have the feeling that I used these works of that I show in this show in a wrong way, or that I do any something wrong with to Jumana. I mean, I think I did right, and I don't think I should. I mean, she's an artist. She did a show, and what I'm showing is it's not against the Palestinian attitude. I'm showing works that were shown on the 90s, and these works are representative of the shows that we used to show in the 90s. So it's not something that it's not against her or against her attitude. I don't feel bad about it. I was doubted. We really thought about it a lot, and but that was the decision, and I think we did right. There was another story with the work that I showed you with the fashion show at the Israel Museum. Maybe you want to tell about it? Maybe I'd rather you tell it.
What about Sharif Waked? Yes. Yeah, it's work now exhibiting in the Israeli Museum, and it was more or less the same case. I think that they
never showed it.
No, they never showed it before. They bought it like I think a year ago, or before.
They bought it now for the show.
Okay, so they bought. I don't know when they bought it, but he decided that he don't want to exhibit it, or this is the way that they found the solution. He didn't want to participate in the show. I don't know all the details. So he decided the museum will buy the work, and then they can exhibit it whatever they want. I don't know, but from the email that I got, like he sent an email after the opening. He said that he never agreed to take part in this show in the 60 years exhibition. So I don't know all the details, but I know that he sent this email afterwards and said, like, I never sold this work to the museum, that they can use it in the exhibition. He sent an email, like kind of...
I got the same email. He said, yes. He said that, and we also addressed him to be on the show, but in our show, but he refused. So he's not in the show.
Yeah, to participate in the show, but the museum decided not to ask him.
Can I add something to this? For me, it's a very interesting issue. It's very complex and complicated, probably, to make a decision in such a situation. But I think it's a question for the future of our collections and the museum. So sometimes you have in the contracts with the artists how the work should be displayed in terms of the space.
Yeah.
You know, but for me, the context is the equal question as the space. So this is the question for the artists as well, how to negotiate with the institutions. So I think that question of context of the exhibition is becoming more and more important for the artists and the institutions. So it's very, very important and interesting question. So the copyrights are based on economical questions, but this is a question of a copyright somehow as well, of the rights, realities.
It's just another, I do think there's a difference. If Jemana would contact you, that would make a difference. If she hasn't contacted you, then in a sense, you have the right to show the work, I think there's a difference. And I think if an artist says something directly against it, that would be where I start to get nervous at that point. But just another sort of anecdote, we have a big Lissitzky collection in the museum. One of the interesting things about that is that the intention of the artist, particularly up to 35, before the Stalinist socialist realist decrees, was basically against copyright, for reproduction, against originality, all those aspects which are against the US, Western European canon of art, were actually trying to be undermined in that experiment in the Soviet Union from 17 to 35. And I think, what's interesting now is we're redoing the exhibition of Lissitzky, and we're actually trying to get back to some of the initial intentions of the artist, which had been wiped out by a capitalized version of his work, or an auratic. You could look at it either way. Either it becomes a kind of aura about the originality of Lissitzky, or it's about capitalizing it and turning it into a market, because obviously if something can be reproduced infinitely, then it's no longer, doesn't have a value to a collection the same way. But trying to get away from those influences which happened to his work afterwards, and try and get back somehow. Unfortunately, he's not there to give his permission, but get back to his original intention. So there, the artist's intention becomes a really primary way of trying to change the context that the work has been placed into as a result of its historical value. Yeah? So the artist's intentions does still remain something in play, I think. What the artist wants is still something which is considered, even when the artist is dead. It can be still a way of understanding what you can do with a collection.
Anyhow, I think that it would be really a shame if there would not be even one Palestinian artist in all of these 6 exhibitions.
There's no Palestinian artist celebrating 60 years of Israel. It's not a shame. I think it could be a strong statement that no Palestinian artist is celebrating the 60th. It's almost an obvious statement, because it's what it means for Israelis, it's totally different than what it means for Palestinians. And I understand the complexity from your point of view, and I understand the desire to say we're also showing a Palestinian artist to show that we are actually nice. It's to show that
we don't show it as decorative, we show it because it is in the context.
Good work. I'm sure that I understood what you said about the work was actually done during the 90s, yes. If it was just a show about art that was done in Israel in the 90s, it's one thing. But it's a show that is celebrating 60 years of Israel, and if non-Palestinian artists will participate in it, it's a statement. It's a strong statement that I think a museum that has the power can participate in such a statement and say, let's find out. I know that it's complex and it has other sides, but from the way I respond to it right now, or just generally when I thought about the 60th, the exhibitions of the celebrating 60th birthday, it almost sounds like it.
Okay, so I understand you 100%, but we are showing 3 Palestinians, by the way, that we're showing in our museum in the 90s, and we are very clear about it. It is part of the exhibition of the 90s, because the situation with the Herzliya Museum is different than the other museums. We are the 90s. We made the 90s, and you must agree. So it's another situation for us. We are not playing.
It's a show that is also trying to be more critical of Israeli nationalism. It's a show that actually talks about some of these matters, but still, just sometimes the accent can be very strong.
Yes. I agree. here, yes, everybody can, I mean, there's for it and against it. We decided for it, and we doubted a lot. There was a big debate about it. And if I'm not mistaken, Doron even sent one email to Jumana, but she never answered. But it doesn't matter. I mean, the decision was to show her without asking her. He's just even more sensitive than me, maybe. And that is one of the result of that the labels in the exhibition and the catalog are in 3 languages. There is also Arabic, and that is unique. So it's not because of guilt conscious, it's because we think we are doing right, presenting the 3 Palestinian.
I would like to talk a little bit about the current situation and power of the state, because Denka, you mentioned a very interesting thing in the end of your presentation, that you said that the decline of the state would be a catastrophe for the institution. So I think it's interesting to have a closer look what is actually happening with the state at the moment. I mean, in Europe, it's quite clear that we have the EU, and the individual state is losing power and becoming part of a state communion, and more and more decisions are made on this higher level of the EU. But I think it's interesting to see what is happening to the relation of the nation and the state, because I mean, in the ideal political imaginary, the nation and the state is one thing. So the nation is backing up the ideological context of the state, and the state is providing, ideally, it's providing welfare and juridical structures and so on. And so in an ideal situation, these 2 concepts are together. But what I see at the moment is that the state is losing power because the state is somehow becoming part, at least in Europe, part of this community. But also, I mean, there are like also more transnational, it's not the EU, more transnational structures like the NATO for military, there's a military structure, WTO for economic and so on. And so like more and more decisions are made on this higher level. And but how do you see that these local responsibilities, are they still task of the state, or do you think it's necessary that the state is taking care of all these things you consider necessary for the institution to provide, or do you think it could also be an alternative structure, or also be like a different, like for example the region, could that also be possible? That
when I was talking about the declining of the state and the possible death of the state, it was the national state. But what I am for is not a national state, but a kind of a political form, which European Union is. It's a new state actually somehow. So it replaced the state in certain level. So I think this kind of political structure, we need to protect the civil society. I can't find another model,
That's what you said,
yeah. So I can't, of course I'm not talking now anymore about the national state, which is dying, and it's good that it's dying. But there should be something, that should be a structure. And it's a question if the bigger structures are better than the smaller, if the European Union is better structured than the small countries, and if the global, there are many questions, and the speculations about the global state or the global citizen. It's a question of the citizen also, which has been changing in the history. So we now have a European citizen, and I was trying to present how it became a problematic thing for the people who live in the European Union, and how it's difficult to get this European citizenship. So there are many new problems and questions, and there is no clear answer. Probably there are. What I'm sure it's the projection of a public institution on certain political level, which we need. So it's kind of alternative to the private sphere, which is becoming more and more strong. But what you were asking is very much related to the question of financing. So that's a problem in Slovenia, that the state hasn't succeeded to establish the proper relationship between the private and public capital. So we had the opportunities to get the serious money from the private sources. So there was last year a proposal from one rich person who has a PR company and who was very supportive also for our Eastern art collection. So he went to the ministry and he proposed to the minister a foundation. You know, we know what is foundation in the private public could be also very negative, but you know, in certain situation and in our situation, it was kind of the only possible solution to go on to purchase the works in the next future, because you know, also Slovene, as I wanted to say, Slovene artists and the most successful Eastern European artists now are becoming simply too expensive for the Eastern art institutions, and there is not enough budget in the state, or in the municipalities to buy this work. Of course, you can ask the artist privately, please, but that's not the right way. I mean, so we are always talking about the same problem. It's really boring, but it's money. It's a financing. It's about this.
Do you think when civil society is defined on the level of the EU, what would be the effect on the institution? Isn't it also moving further and further away of like a local situation, local understanding, local needs, and that in fact it's the tendency will develop even more into this direction that representative, symbolic, iconic building or institution is requested, and not so much what is really also a local need of civil.
Of course, I mean there are many problems related to the European Union and its cultural policy, also the cultural programs. So, you know, we are happy to finally get the possibilities to get some European grants for the projects, but at the same time there are priorities, of course, and for example, there was a period when Eastern European projects were like the high priorities, and now that's not the case anymore. So if you want to continue with this project, sorry, it doesn't work anymore. So it's related again to the politics, and you know, it's a question how the European politics is going on. Who knows? Maybe it became very right and very regressive politics, and then we have a bigger ship than we have now with a smaller structure.
It's also a paradox sometimes, because for example, what is in Warsaw, the problem is very local actually. Everything is blocking on a local level. And it's also, it's not only in Poland, it's also happened at everything. And there is also, because the structure actually hasn't really changed since the 80s. So you have more or less the major is someone who was in the previous, so they're not even, in a way, they don't know even how to deal sometimes with all this amount of money. Everybody is like afraid of taking the responsibility, how to like also to have such big problems. So sometimes this is also the problem in the local press.
I think that's like really the worst situation, if you have to deal with the local plus a superstructure that is completely detached. But Charles,
that's what I wanted to say. I mean, the notion of civil society in European Union, we're talking when outside the European Union now, but it's incredibly weak. I mean, I think the European Union in the 50 years of its existence has done so little to build a civil society, even amongst the old core of the 6 countries, you know, of Germany, Benelux and France, that actually there's been very little construction of what we could call a civil society. You know, Soros did more to construct a civil society in the 10 years that it supported activities in former Central Europe than the European Union has on a cultural level. And we talk about these European funds and Culture 2000 and Culture 2007 or whatever. But actually, they've done very, very little. If you imagine the European Union had opened cultural centres in all the main cities, or even the capitals, but perhaps even wider than that, and they've been actually dynamic places where some sort of European civil society, some sort of discourse could have happened. No, but the nation states, we talk about the nation states getting weaker. It seems to me, at least in Europe at the moment, that the opposite tendency is happening, that people are feeling very alienated because they have no sense of a civil society in Europe, as a public sphere in Europe which they can contribute to. That's absolutely not been developed by the Eurocrats in Brussels. And at the same time, whenever there's any kind of democratic voice that people in the nation states of Europe have, they vote against the whole European project, the whole thing. The French and the Dutch rejected the European constitution. It was a stupid constitution. They rejected it. Just last week, the Irish rejected the last treaty. So that's civil society. That's the civil society. That's the voice of civil society. And I don't necessarily think it's a stupid voice. I don't think it's a xenophobic voice. I think it's a voice of civil society, and that's the civil society we have. The slightest chance that anybody in Europe gets to vote against Europe, they do it. And that's something that in the European Union we have to deal with, because if we don't deal with it, then there won't be a Europe for Turkey or Israel to join one day. There won't be a European Union. It will not exist because of that failure to develop a civil society. So in a sense, I don't see that as so much of a threat. As you know, the other tendency, it seems to me, is that with the privatization model, what seems to be happening is that there are a few cities that are becoming concentrations of cultural capital. And if you look at the amount of private collections that are opening now in Berlin, for instance, that's a sign of the future, much more than the European civil society, it seems to me. A sign that there'll be a few cities, London, maybe Paris, but they seem to have messed up with Pinot, Berlin, where a lot of the development will go on that private level. And they're incredibly exclusive. Like the Boros Foundation, which just opened, you have to book ahead, you have to pay €17 each to get in groups of 10, and it's already booked until September to get into it, because that's the kind of access that people have, and it's almost that he personally decides whether you're a group that is good enough to come in or not. That's the kind of public sphere that we have in the future, I think, something that where even that idea of getting into a museum is guarded by the oligarchs, basically.
Regarding what Charles just said and your question, what's the symbol of the museum or of the building itself, of the architecture? It's national, it's not international, it's not EU. In Warsaw, they're building new MoMA, they use the name MoMA, it's kind of international and everything, but the building, its purpose is only for national terms, being proud Polish or proud, that's what I felt at least, and I feel that not just in the EU, everywhere, it's like we go international, we go west, but on the other hand, every mayor built its own national building, and he wants to be. Yeah, but it's like. But it's.
I think it's competition. The mechanism is competition. I mean, therefore, also you can explain this Bilbao thing that scary looks like Los Angeles, and this is like kind of a key mechanism of neoliberalism is its competition. So, what is defining your position in a community or in people you're working with or people you're relating to is competition. And so this is also what Charles said, I don't think that the nation state is still there so much and it's increasing. I think it's nationalism, but it's not the state. Yeah. And so this is, I think it's really important that the nation and the state are really diverging,
I think it's important to say that the notion of the national state is not the same anymore as it was 30 years ago. That, you know, it is changing, and we have the package of anachronisms as the national state in Balkans in 90s. You know, we had strong national states fighting between themselves. So it was like something became very strong again. But it was not the same national state as in 80s anymore. So that's something else, and what is now you are about the competition, you know. So it's something else again. It's not the nations compete between themselves, but it's a hidden capital which is behind. And who knows